All right, so I think we're going to start. Before anything, just a quick disclaimer. By entering this event, you agree to be photographed and recorded, and you agree to the distribution of such photographs and recordings by all parties through any or all media. If you don't want to be recorded, please rename yourself to your first name or your team number. And we ask that at all times you keep your video off. Thank you, and we hope you enjoy the seminar. Today's seminar, presented by WARP7, is how to raise money as a non-COVID charity. My name is Mackenzie Arnault. I'm a grade 12 student at Western Tech and a part of Team WARP7, and I'll be moderating today's seminar. Now we're going to continue with the land acknowledgement. So we acknowledge that we are hosted on the lands of the Mississaugas of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Wendat. We also recognize the enduring presence of all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples. Our seminar agenda includes important dates for future seminars and our pitch competition, a short briefing on our pitch competition, our seminar logistics, panelist introductions, and a final question period. We have a couple important dates coming up. This includes March 11th, which is our seminar on building meaningful partnerships with corporate sponsors. And on March 25th, we have formulating and delivering a pitch to a venture capitalist. Finally, to conclude our seminar series, we have April 8th, which is our Dragon's Den style pitch competition. In this pitch competition, you'll have 15 minutes with any number of presenters of your choice. There will be more details closer to the date, but some include that the last seminar with a venture capitalist will teach you how to create a pitch. The rubric for the evaluation will be explained in the last seminar, and you'll have 2 weeks to create your pitch to present to our judges. For this seminar in particular, it'll be recorded just like all the others, and all participants must be muted with their cameras off at all times. If you have a question, feel free to ask through the chat only to our specific Send Questions Here moderator. You can ask questions whenever you want, and we'll keep track of them and get to them when we can. Now it's time to introduce our wonderful speakers. First, we have Sue Sheridan from Big Brothers and Big Sisters. So Sue, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks, Mackenzie. Sue Sheridan, currently with Big Brothers Big Sisters of Toronto. To give you a little bit of background on myself, I currently reside in Port Perry. I have 3 children, 2 grandchildren, and 4 dogs. I started out my career about 3 decades ago, and I was working with the Royal Agricultural Winter Fair, transitioned from there to work at an organization called Women in Film and Television Toronto. Left there to go to Boys and Girls Clubs, the national office, and now am firmly delighted to be at Big Brothers Big Sisters of Toronto. And something to note, as a fundraiser, I can only sell things that I really feel passionate about. So I couldn't sell a pair of shoes to save my life, but I can sell things that matter to my heart.
Thank you so much. And now we're going to hear from Arti Javeri from First Canada.
Hi, everyone. This is Arti Javeri, and from First Canada. I am the VP of Partnerships here. But in my normal life, I guess off-work life, I'm a mom and a mentor I have been a mentor for teams and also a volunteer. And to echo Sue's expression, I've been very passionate for FIRST for a long time. I've been a volunteer for almost 10 plus years. And then, so I was working with Hewlett Packard organization for almost 20 years and then joined FIRST about 3 years ago. So my passion kind of led me to where I am today. And I got introduced to FIRST through my son, through their robotics team at school. So it's quite a journey to be able to, from a mom role to a mentor role to a volunteer role, and now actually being with the actual organization that I love and have a great passion to bring STEM experiences to kids. It's been a great journey. So that's about me. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, and our final speaker is Linda Antoniadis.
Hi, thank you guys for inviting me to join you today. I'm very excited to offer what I can about what I've learned over my years in fundraising. I actually come from the corporate world, so I do know how to sell a pair of shoes, Sue. I've sold lots of things. I did a lot of sports and sports marketing and worked in golf and tennis and figure skating and spent a lot of time really understanding what partners are looking for, what people want, and how to make sure that you're presenting it to them in a way that they understand, that is meaningful to them, because there are a lot of people out there asking, and you know, we've seen it in the questions that you've offered us, that there's a lot of pressure to try to figure out what's the best approach. So you know, I would say that you know, I'm at Diabetes Canada now. We're a national health organization. We support youth. We do have youth. People don't think about diabetes that way. They think it's something that older people have, but there are type 1 diabetes community that we do a lot with. So I really understand the needs of youth and really expressing how important being with other people, doing things that you love is such an important development, and within the context of COVID, even more important perhaps. But I just like you know, my co-guests today, I am passionate about health and public health, and I really do think that having some passion for what you do really does help you with your storytelling. And I'm looking forward to the conversation. So thanks for having me.
Thank you. And just a little reminder, this is a panelist style seminar, so feel free to ask any question that you have, no matter how silly you think it may be. They're here to help, and they're here to answer your questions for you. With that said, we're going to start on the question period now. So, all right. So the first question is, how do we demonstrate our need compared to the COVID frontline workers? Why don't I address this question to Linda?
So I think it's so important not to forget what's happening in the world, and absolutely the frontline workers are critical in helping us. And so the way that I would look at it is, you're not in competition with the frontline workers, because they are doing an important job, and there are a lot of people that are fundraising for them. That doesn't mean that, and because they are a priority doesn't mean you're not a priority. So I think that's just one of the important takeaways, is to not consider them competition, but to consider them, to recognize them, but also to recognize what are the things that you deliver. And if you think about the context of COVID-19, we know that COVID-19 has isolated people, it's taken them apart. And so any opportunity that you can highlight how your program is bringing people together and helping youth continue to sort of push through in spite of COVID-19, actually. And you know what, I'm not suggesting that you're going to get everything you got last year, or, you know, because funding is definitely at a challenge. But I would say, and I'm sure there will be other comments, I hope I'm not the only one making a comment on this, but I do think that that it's important to acknowledge, but do not forget the value that you deliver your community as well.
Yeah, totally understand. Would anyone else like to jump in?
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Mackenzie, and also to your point, Linda. Everyone's dealing with something different, and everyone's need is different. We all have our own parts to play in this pandemic. So I think as long as your need is genuine and you know what you're asking for, I think that's kind of, it boils down to really what is it that you're looking for, what is your need, and not comparing it to somebody else's need, because that need might be very different in a different, so I think identifying really what your need is during this time, and then remembering that sponsorships is all about people. It's still, at the end of the day, all about people. It's about relationships, it's about community, it's about building really, connections. So as long as your need is genuine and you're able to identify that and clearly communicate that, I think there are a lot of other sources of sponsorships or donors that will be able to help you.
All right, thank you. Another question we have is, should teams ask for less this year than they would normally from COVID?
Never ask for less. Never.
You want to elaborate, Sue?
Building on what my co-presenters indicated from the past question, COVID is a moment in time, and corporations don't sustain by today or only thinking about today. They sustain themselves with both the growth that they're experiencing today, the challenges that they're experiencing, and then thinking about the future. So, for your demographic, for the things that you're trying to accomplish, you're their future workforce, you're their future innovators, you're their future clients, customers, etc. So don't diminish the value of you as individuals in addition to whatever it is you're selling. And so to that point, the value of your product is what someone is willing to pay for it. That's it, it's market rate. And so never go in asking for less. In fact, I would add a 10% on top, because sometimes corporations are looking to negotiate, and go from there. Know your bottom line, know what you have to get, but never underestimate the value. And bring a puppy or something that'll grab their hearts.
All right, does anyone else have anything to add for that point? Sue covered it pretty well.
Yes.
All right, another question we have is, we're in a small town and our healthcare workers need all the help that they can get. We feel bad asking for some of the same companies for money. What do we do?
I can go with that. So I think the pandemic has brought in, like I said earlier, so many different perspectives. And maybe as a team, like I said, if you identify what your need is and reflect back on what you want to do, how you want to do it, how you want to help, and if the same companies are offering money, are they putting the money in different buckets? Have they restructured their funding? Have they are now wanting to give it to more frontline workers? Or maybe they want to put more into education, because stats have shown that we need to get more people into STEM. So maybe there's different areas that companies are re-looking at shifting money. Especially the pandemic has brought in a lot of thoughts in different companies to be able to figure out what and how they are able to now shift money and provide it not just for a specific area, but maybe even broader at times, right? So they have been able to really look at their own philanthropies and own sponsorships and figure out where monies can go. So I don't think it is bad to ask the same company money, but at the same time, I think identifying why you're asking for it and why is it different from before is really important, because maybe that will help you and help them also maybe figure out where they want to invest in.
I imagine some teams are struggling with somewhat of an ethical dilemma of whether they're deserving enough of the money from sponsors compared to, let's say, frontline workers. What are your guys' opinions about that? How about Linda or Sue?
I'm happy to start. Linda, you're welcome to jump in. The reality is if every corporation in the world turned their attention to healthcare workers, we might make it through COVID, all of us together, no more deaths, but there would be the death of that corporation, right? So they just can't simply stop operating in a way that puts investment into community, puts investment into innovation. It's not the reality of our world. And so if you feel that you're not worthy because COVID has dominated the headlines, think of yourself as, the individuals that are going to support the economy getting back to its vibrancy, and that's the critical stage. So we're going to get through COVID, but are we going to survive it? And that next wave, yourselves included, are going to be the ones that help continue to create a vibrant economy. So you're worthy, bottom line.
Yeah, thank you. Linda, do you have anything to add, or? No,
I think Sue said it very well. Just don't forget that you do important work. You're here because you're passionate about it. And it's, it is hard because there's competition for money, for sure. They're getting many requests, but make sure to remind yourself, get your team members to remind each other, you're there doing something really important to you and important to the future, and you should be proud of it. That doesn't mean you're always going to get the money, but make sure you feel good that you're proud of what you guys are doing.
Thank you. So kind of going back to competing with money from frontline workers or other important causes, do you think that our robotics teams should switch focus from STEAM to mental health or youth? What do you think, Arti?
I think they actually go hand in hand. I mean, look at what the pandemic taught us. When the pandemic when last March, I think when we were all told to stay home, everything shut down for everybody, right? Everything was totally taken away from us. We were all put into our own homes and had to stay there for a long time. And it's a year now and we are still there. And I think it has affected the mental health, it has affected students, it has affected adults. And I think it has to go hand in hand in everything we do, whether it's being at school today or whether it's just sitting in your home. I mean, through FIRST Robotics, we've figured that it's, the first thing when the pandemic hit us, I think it was like, what are we going to do? Everything that we do is in person. Everything that we do touches people. Everything that we do is alive at our events. You have 2,000 people. You've got children coming out there competing. And how are we going to run the program? How are we going to give these students those experiences? And what is going to happen with everybody? Like, how is the program going to be run? And how are the students going to react to this? And I think that what we put into place very soon was one of our first kind of live shows, for example. It's like a TV show for our community almost, where we decided to bring everybody on that show. And then we started sharing things. We started sharing experiences. We started talking about stories. We started hearing from our alumni, from our volunteers. And that we felt kept the mental health of our community together. We weren't able to meet in person, but I think you can't give up one for the other. I think they go hand in hand. And today, Mackenzie, if you've ever come to our events, we have quiet rooms at our events. And those were mainly designed to help students who could not deal with loud noises or competition arenas to be able to go to these quiet spaces and work with them, right? So I think mental health goes hand in hand with everything we do today. And I don't think one or the other prioritized. I think they should just be always acknowledged in everything that we do.
All right, thank you. And let's say there was a hypothetical sponsorship letter that a team were to send out. Do you think that if they haven't talked about youth mental health, maybe during COVID, it's a good time to include it in their sponsorship letter or pitch to potential sponsors?
So I'm happy to take that one because it's something that we're actually doing at Big Brothers Big Sisters currently. So we know that a positive, caring adult, we call them bigs, in a child's life is a positive thing to do, that there's all kinds of social, emotional benefits to doing that. We didn't talk about mental health. We talked about mentorship. We talked about bigs and littles. We talked about thriving communities. When we noted that the government in particular was going to be paying a lot of attention through their donation to, or their investment in Kids Help Phone and Sick Kids and a number of others, we figured out a way to highlight how the work we do supports positive mental health. So it has to be authentically connected. And I'm actually happy to share a document. Maybe I can share it with you, Mackenzie. I'm doing it for Lego right now, where the types of things that you're doing actually support positive identity and social competence and things like that, which in turn create more vibrant, positive mental health. So I think it's not about, you didn't do it before, or you've got letters out there now. Don't worry about that. We're all kind of in a kerfuffle. Everybody's trying to pivot and figure out what's their voice. But I would say definitely figuring out how to connect it very authentically, and then adding it from here. And even if you've sent letters and you haven't heard, you might want to follow up with a phone call to a person and just say, I just wanted to give you a little bit more information about how we affect positive mental health in young people.
I think that's a thing not a lot of FIRST teams may have thought about. So it's important to remember and maybe add it to some of our sponsorship letters in the future. So now I have a question for Linda, and that's, should we reach out to a company if we saw them on TV giving a large donation to a COVID charity, or do we look for other companies?
So I think this question is really about, who is your audience and who are you targeting? Because you want to make sure that you've got limited time and resources, that you're trying to really send out requests to companies that that you know a little bit about. So if they were responding and donating because of COVID, was it because of COVID and education? Was it do they support education? Do they support STEAM? Do they support, the things that you represent? Just out of the blue because they're giving money definitely gets people excited. I get excited too, believe me. I'm sure all of us have been through that, where you're like, whoa, they've got lots of money. But always remember, all companies are giving money. They still are. It's less for sure. Like we felt the impact of COVID, but you will have more success with a more precisely targeted organization, because in your letters, you're going to show them at the beginning the alignment. I know you support X, or I've seen your work with things, and that is very similar to us. And, just again, it's all about, when you talk to an organization, you want to show them you've shared values, you're in it, you've got the same approach, or you can deliver the same messages as their corporate responsibility, or whatever it is that they share. So I would use that to guide versus, continue to do your little, Google alerts or Feedly or whatever it is that you're using to identify what what you do with your research. Continue to do that, but let that guide you.
All right, thank you so much. Some teams are wondering if companies typically open a new budget line for COVID-19, or if they're taking out of their already existing charitable donations budget. How about Sue or Arti, if you want to answer this?
Sue, do you want to go? I can go, doesn't matter. Yeah, I think I haven't seen anybody actually, at least the ones that I deal with, don't have a budget line for COVID-19, but they have, they have done a lot of surveys now, or they've got information where they're basing, or they're reevaluating their monies, I guess, on how they are spending their philanthropic dollars. Because when COVID hit, I knew there were a lot of companies that wanted to jump and help as well, just like all of us in FIRST and all the FIRST teams. So they were at that point looking to see, how they can help, and if they had to shift any dollars at that point, they did. But I think as the year has passed, I think from my experience, I know there are some companies that have put in maybe more funding towards probably an education, or not everybody's reshifted everything, but they've thought about, education funds or engineering funds, or more dollars towards maybe a science project or something like that. But I don't think there's anything specifically on COVID or on a pandemic, but it's more towards looking to the future, like what I think Sue said before, is investing dollars into what we want to build for the future for ourselves, to be ready again for such things to happen.
Great
Yeah.
answer.
I would add that I don't know that they ever had a proper budget line for COVID. I think it was, whatever type of emergency funding that they might have been able to pull together. More importantly, right now, I think in tandem to COVID, I think that we're starting to see a lot of money being directed to BIPOC initiatives. And so if there's a way that you can capitalize on that, I would strongly suggest that you do. So you might be able to find great percentages on BIPOC community entering the STEM realm, and how your work supports engagement of BIPOC communities getting into that work, because that's also attractive to corporations from a positive community message, corporate social responsibility, but also again that future workforce, and making sure that they are attracting the best and brightest talent across.
Thank you so much. Shifting gears a little bit, the audience wants to know what your companies did specifically to combat donation deficits during COVID-19. So Linda, did Diabetes Canada have decreased donations in 2020? If so, what specific changes did your organization make?
So we did. We along with many charities across Canada did have changes. The change in funding was impacted across the organization in different ways. And so I'll just give some very high level examples. Diabetes Canada has a social enterprise, which is a clothing, we collect clothing and we resell it. And that's how we fundraise. Well, our major partner was Value Village. When Value Village closed, our operation ceased and that revenue just ended. So it's an example of just how quickly your business can be impacted. So for us, that revenue loss was almost immediate, and it continues. Now we're back in and things are starting to build up. And again, this goes to that point. This is temporary. Things will settle back in. We are seeing it already. The biggest change and impact for us was those in-person events, the conferences, the education seminars. So we pivoted to virtual. Now, the great thing about virtual, it opens and closes doors, is virtual allows you to reach some more people that you may not have reached previously. So people who weren't able to make it because of geographic location or funding, they couldn't take the time off work, were able to join. So in some instances, we were able to increase the attendance and the participation for some of our events, but because we were no longer had the hard costs of an in venue, we reduced our fees. So as a result, the fees went down. So those are just some of the impacts. So how we pivoted was, instead of completely losing all the revenue, we went virtual. And, I think we'll talk about this a little more. I don't want to get too far into that because I'm sure there's some more specific questions about, how to interact and engage in the COVID world. But I would say that I think almost every charity across the country did have to make some changes, and we are dealing with fewer dollars right now because just the reality of even and here's where I'm not sure where money comes from, like because you're talking about going to corporations, but even just people who were doing fundraising for us, who were doing like golf tournaments, like we would have what you would call third-party fundraising, those things were canceled. So this domino effect continued. But again, what they started to do was, like, people who were raising money in Zumba classes started doing online Zumba classes to fundraise. So again, maybe not as much revenue, but certainly, there was a rebound, and that's kind of how we pivoted, was essentially taking everything virtual.
Thank you. And Arti, what was the impact on FIRST from COVID-19 sponsors and donations?
So we actually were, as you know, our primary focus is STEM and bringing STEM experiences and inspiring students to become and take on STEM careers in the future. And that's, having that, I think the importance of STEM has been there for the last decade. We've seen a lot of corporations, a lot of companies investing in children and specifically in STEM fields. So we actually did pretty okay for our sponsorship levels. We actually had an increased demand, especially when the Ontario government decided to put coding as part of their curriculum. We actually had to now provide for more coding classes or more opportunities for students to come and learn. And while we couldn't do it in a face-to-face environment or through our programs, we actually opened up summer camps during the summer to do coding. We also did a lot of coding during, we have actually drop-in sessions right now that are happening, that are free of charge. And we've got that through a sponsor as well. But there was the demand kind of grew for us to be able to be able to bring STEM more in for children. So that opened our doors a little bit more. So I wouldn't say we've declined in sponsorship. We've just definitely kept our maintained, but the focus on STEM grew so much that I think we kind of just adapted quickly to bring that experience with the funders that we have today. And that really helped us during this pandemic.
All right, good answer. Sue, what happened at your organization and what changes did you make? You're muted. Yeah, there you go.
In the first 2 months, we lost $1 million in revenue from an event that we were hosting. very traditional, not-for-profit gala where we sold tables and that, that kind of stuff. So we knew that that was coming, was inevitable. So we actually rewrote our business plan and focused on 3 different components. Unfortunately, we were ones who had to lay off staff because the schools were closed, so our in-school mentoring programs stopped. Myself and the other 2 senior leaders took a significant reduction in salary and did so happily. And then we scrambled to figure out ways to reinvent ourselves. So doing virtual mentoring, engaging with seniors to be able to provide support for young people virtually. Training seniors, which became a really interesting avenue. So if seniors didn't know how to engage with online technology, we were there to support them and walk them through. We got a significant donation from Rogers because we were able to present a case where there's a lot of dialogue about kids online. We knew that we had 150 littles who had no access to technology. So we turned a need into an opportunity for a corporation to do some good and to get some, they did it for all the right reasons, but they could also generate some positive press. So there wasn't any, as I'm sure as Arti and Linda can attest to, it was a mad scramble, and it was just, and also note, we did it at a time when the We Charity was collapsing. And so charities were under, extreme scrutiny from the general public about use of funds. And so there was a lot of factors that really did have the potential to have a very negative impact. So think on your feet, be innovative, be flexible, and don't ever write anything in stone. Always have a big eraser nearby.
I'm sure it was super reassuring for a lot of teams to know that they weren't the only ones going through a mad scramble trying to figure things out. But it seems like all of your companies shifted to online platforms, and that seemed to be the most effective. So with that, I have a couple questions regarding your sponsorships and keeping in touch online. For example, how do you maintain strong partnerships when you can't meet your sponsors in person? How about Linda answers this question?
So we talk on video, and I'll tell you what's interesting is I'm older than you are, all of you people listening probably. I wasn't using video a lot. I would either meet someone in person or I would be on the phone. So this concept of videoing has been an acceleration. So I think, one of the things that I've noticed is being able to see somebody on the video allows for a more meaningful conversation than just on the telephone. So one of the things I stress is to try to book a Zoom call or whatever you use, Skype or Teams or whatever. Try to get them on video so they can see you. They will feel differently about you when they can see you with your puppy or your little robot or whatever it is, whatever they can see that will be that emotion, and for them to genuinely see who you are. I think that is, to me, one of the things that has allowed me to maintain relationships. And what's even more interesting is there are people that I've only ever talked to on the phone because they live in Vancouver, and it's the first time I've actually ever seen them. Like, I never thought to put a video call. So, even I could learn some new tricks that I will probably continue to use going forward that I wouldn't have in the past.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And do you think that it's worth it for first teams to have video calls with all of their sponsors, big or small, or just their biggest partners?
So there was something that went around on Facebook early days of the pandemic, and it was kind of a pun on people that couldn't get to the hairdresser and their roots were showing, and it was called "Your Roots Are Showing." And what it really meant was, when we engage in this way, I actually have the ability to see where you live. And I know that in my case with my 4 dogs, they have input into my conversation sometime, or my grandchildren want to be on the camera. And so in fundraising, I would say one of the core skills that you need to have is learning how to build relationships. And this platform gives you the opportunity to build authentic relationships because your roots are showing. So, you know, if in your case, you know, maybe your parent or your guardian is saying, you know, dinner's ready, it's a moment to have a little giggle together and say, you know, oh, my dinner's ready. Sorry, gotta go. You know, like, don't undervalue the benefit of building that relationship, and absolutely take the opportunity to do it. And don't be ashamed if your mom interrupts your video. That's who you are, and in part they're investing in you.
I know a lot of first teams are confined to their email inboxes, so it is almost a blessing to have this platform that we can now use to interact with our sponsors in a much more meaningful way. So that's good to hear. Arti, are there more opportunities to connect with sponsors now they're on a virtual platform, such as virtual conferences or meetings that students can take advantage of?
Again, I think like Sue said, if you can within your sponsorship, within your current sponsors, you can definitely create a a communication plan, if you will, and figure out, you know, can we do this monthly? Can we do this quarterly? Should we do this? And then figure out, do you want to have an event virtually with your sponsors, maybe highlighting your programs, or you're definitely able to do more virtually, I think, than going in person, because sometimes your sponsors are, in a further distant remote area, maybe, or you're in a remote area and they're in a city. So I think virtual has opened up those doors. And in a typical year, you wouldn't have ever imagined that you would actually meet with your sponsors virtually, because you'd invite them to a demo, or you'd invite them for your kickoff day, or, you know, a ship day, or your bag and tag night. And now you can actually have them virtually. Probably even if you're at school, you can probably still have them virtually available. So I think it has definitely opened up more doors. I think people will look at this next year, if everything goes back to normal, in a different format, and we will probably use a little more of these learnings to be more connected with sponsors and our partners.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I have just one more point on that. What is also, I find important with partners, is to ask them, how often would you like to talk to me? Like, would you be comfortable with an update, a call? Do you want me to send you an update? And I'm not sure, like, the timing of when you ask them and then when the event happens, but if you can think of the timing between when you start initiating a conversation and when the actual event is, leave it up to them, and then explain why you want to talk to them. To say, you know, we'd love to give you updates, and make sure you can do it first before you offer, of course. But, you know, even just say, could we do a 30-minute call once every 2 months or 4 months or 1 month? We'd love to check in to make sure we're still on track and give you any updates that you require. And they'll be honest with you. They'll say, you know what, how about we do it every 3 months, but I'd love an email update once a month. And that way they don't forget about you. You want to make sure that they remember. And I also think one of the big things is, remember, you're asking them for something, and then what can you give them? What kind of updates can you share to them? Because they want to know where you're successful. If you guys have a new success on the team, or you can share a picture of something that was produced, they'll love that. They will love to learn that. So maybe that's part of that. The plan that Arti was talking about was just creating a plan, sticking to it, but then ask your partners what they prefer, because I'm sure they will have you'll get different responses.
Thank you. Our next question is, what should our target audience be in order to maximize funding this year? Meaning, like, what specific types of companies should teams reach out to? How about Sue or Arti, if you want to answer this?
I think there's two pieces of it. One is what's current today, and what companies are looking for. And I think Sue mentioned BIPOC is kind of right now in, and I think people are looking for that kind of funding, and those audiences that might create a little bit more interest. But the first thing I think, as an FRC team, and being a mentor in an FRC team, I think in the past, is looking really at what are your team goals, right? Who are you? Who really are you, to be able to figure out what is it that you're trying to do with the sponsor funds? What is it that you want the funds for? And understanding where like you may be in a community, like there are so many FRC teams in remote areas, which is very difficult to find funding. So what can you offer the sponsors? When Linda said, what is it something that you can deliver to them? Because I think when you're thinking about sponsorships, it's the relationship building, it's the connection. They're giving you money. So what can you give them in return? Whether it's, some might be happy with just weekly reports or monthly reports or quarterly reports from you. Some might be okay with you inviting them to a demo. But I think being able to understand what is it that builds you as a team, your culture, your values, your mission, your vision, and then tying it to now what is it that you want to do. So some of the FRC teams do outreach in communities that they're very passionate about, because they have that passion. And we all mentioned that I think in our intros, is that if your team is passionate about something, you will make it successful. But if you go behind an audience, or if you go behind the target audience that's in today, but out tomorrow, your team won't have that focus. So I think if you want to see sustainability as an organization or as a team, understanding what are your team's passionate, what are you more concerned about? Is it supporting underserved teams? Is it supporting underserved children? Is it supporting elementary school students? Like what is it that drives your team to be a difference maker? And then figuring out what that niche identity might be for you to be able to pick an initiative and say, where is our audience? Who is really now our sponsors that we can reach out to that have the same wavelength where you're thinking, right? So then you can target those companies or sponsors to be able to now ask for monies, because now you have the same goals, or at least similar goals, to ask for that. But I think it's important to know your team culture, really, because it all drives from that, especially when you have students coming in and out from grade 9 to 12 each year. The team culture is really important, and the mission and vision of the team on what you want to achieve is really critical to understanding what your target audience might be.
And does COVID change what types of companies you would look at? For example, the size of the country, the geographic location, or the different area that they're in?
I personally don't think so. I think it is, like going back to, like, it shouldn't matter what the size of the company is or what, as long as you know that your goals, and you can make that relationship with them, and you can get something out of them, and you can deliver. I think that's more important than the size of the company. Obviously, if you want $1 million, you're not going to go to a small business. You're going to go to an Apple or an Amazon or somebody, right? So it's the target of also what you're trying to get and fund for yourself, right? So.
All right. So what I'm hearing is your team's identity and finding companies that reflect your values are more important than considering COVID circumstances.
Yeah, I think it more than that. I think what I was trying to say is it goes back to really what you as a team want to achieve and your sustainability, right? That's kind of more or less like in any big organization, even a corporate firm, the company has vision, a mission, and values. And based on that, they create their philanthropy, right? So the same thing applies to an FRC team. If you've got that aligned, you kind of have a vision that you can drive through the years and have a connection. And then find that. But if your goal is only to bring money in, then you can reach out to any audience, right? That's something, a totally different way of looking at it. If you want to just bring money in and then figure out how to do it, then I think it's a different way of, again, addressing the need.
Thank you so much, Arti. For Linda, you said to approach companies with shared values. What are those shared values?
So to Arti's point, when every organization, not every, almost all, have some section on their website or somewhere that they talk about their mission or their what they're interested in. So when you're talking to somebody like, I'll just pick a grocery store chain. Grocery store chains like Loblaw will have different areas that they fund. They don't just fund one thing. So you would want to know, okay, is innovation and education important? Well, they talk more about nutrition. So maybe there's not a close link here versus like an IBM, and I'm just talking about big companies, but this would apply later, an IBM or somebody who would have more education focus or STEAM focus. when you're getting into smaller organizations, like somebody who does tutoring, for example, like a Kumon or somebody like that, if you looked, they would probably have a broader mandate, but they would have a very core education mandate. So there would be connection potentially with them wanting to profile and support, you know, that education. So that shared value is you being able to, and I know this takes time, but it doesn't take that much time, and you guys are way quick, like you live on the internet, so you must instantly be able to get it research. But if you can just even spend 15 minutes looking at somebody's website before you formulate that letter to make sure there's an alignment, and even reference it, like if you can say, I understand you support XYZ education, that's where they're going to say, oh, you spent an extra 5 minutes, you actually understand a little bit about us. And then they're a little more receptive versus you coming in and saying, I would like you to support STEAM, and they are, you know, doing H4 education or something. Like, I'm just showing that as an example. That sort of streamlines you into better potential outcome and results for people who are targeted and have that shared vision.
Thank you so much. And maybe I'll direct a question to Sue. If a company has paused operations due to a pandemic, could they help a first team in other ways? For example, by employees helping to mentor teams or to help organize fundraisers or event? Is this reasonable to ask of your sponsors?
100%. So when you look at a corporation, what we as fundraisers do is we look at, we call them assets. It's like, what assets do they have to bring to the table? So at Big Brothers Big Sisters, we will, if you look at our board members, we have a diversity of individuals on our board, and some of them are marketing experts and some of them are financial experts, and you know, there's a diversity of skill set. And in the corporation, so Julie Adams works for Rogers and Rogers Sports and Media. So if we're doing an event, we go to them and we say, you know, would you be willing to do our production? So where we might have a $25,000 production budget, Rogers is willing to cover that cost. In addition, mentoring right now is of great interest to corporations. They do it internally, and they know that they've got to figure out a way to engage in your demographic in a really meaningful way. And so they want to be appealing to you. So if they're open to, I'm now searching for a mentor for somebody on my team. So I'm going out to our corporations to say, you know, who'd be willing to mentor Stephanie? There could be things that they, you know, they might be willing to give you pricing. They might be willing to give you airtime. They might be willing to give you paper. I have no idea. If you don't ask, they don't know. And so yes, always figure out all of the things that you need, and maybe some of the things that you don't even realize you need, and go back to your partners. It is, I always say, when you first meet a partner, it's like you're going for coffee, and your goal is to marry them, because then it'll be harder for them to leave you. When you're just having coffee, they can get up and leave. But the more intentional that you can make that relationship, and the tighter knit that you can make that, that's my dog having a hairball, I apologize. The tighter connection you can make to that corporation, the longer term relationship will last.
All right. And do you think that teams should look for these alternative forms of sponsorships just during COVID? Or do you think that this should be something all teams look for always? Yeah. All right. I know, Sue, you also want to talk about the sponsorship research process. How does that change during COVID, and what is it?
Yeah, so the research cycle is probably the, as Linda and Arti both referenced, it's the most important cycle, so or component of the cycle. So it's a time when you are starting to understand, we call them assets, as I've said. So what is it that you have available to sell? So maybe you're willing to put a flag on your robot, and that flag will have, you know, the name of the company on it, or a sticker, or, you know, maybe your shirts, or whatever that is. So in your research, now you've got your assets, and you're going to spend some time looking for corporations that, as Arti said, I'm so sorry, it never fails. As Arti said, what are the things that sorry, totally lost my train of thought. The research cycle is where you establish who are the most likely individuals that will support your efforts. So it includes things like, as Linda said, you get Google alerts. You look at their corporate social responsibility statements on their website. You look at their annual general reports. Sometimes, you know, they might, we do this often. So you might look at other robotic type events or conferences or whatever, and you pull up their program and you're like, okay, IBM, BlackBerry, TELUS, that's a really good indication that they have interest in the stuff that you are trying to do. And so the research phase, while it can sometimes be onerous at the start, in the long run, you either determine that it's worth moving into that potential solicitation, so asking them for something, or they're too far off your area to continue. So,
and does it change during COVID? No.
I personally would say no. As I say, I think COVID is a moment in time, and corporations, small corporations slightly different, but those medium to large corporations are moving on, and they're thinking about the future.
All right, thank you so much. Maybe a question for Arti. A team is wondering, if you were going to sell a first team, what aspects would you sell? Like, so what are the most important aspects of a first robotics team?
So when I first learned about FIRST, I was very confused as to what do the students do. It was very confusing to me as to, I knew they were competing in a competition, but I couldn't really figure out, like, you know, what, like they learn programming, they learn mechanical, they learn design and all of that thing, and they build this robot and they come and compete at a competition. But very much, I think it was after maybe almost a year or so, I realized the value of the program. And I think if you have to sell first, I think you have to be able to understand the value of it. It's not about that robot, it's about building people, right? And we start our program right from kindergarten all the way to grade 12. So now imagine you're teaching, yeah, you know, if I had to send somebody to learn programming, I can register somebody into any class, and if they have the capacity to learn, they'll learn programming. But what FIRST is about learning not just the build of a robot, but learning soft skills, communication, teamwork, collaboration. I mean, look at you, Mackenzie, you're moderating a panel here with 3 adults on the call. So things like that you're going to be learning with FIRST, that, you know, you're learning life skills that are not, that are taught through practice all through those years that you come into FIRST. So you're building character for children. And I think that's been the biggest passion for me, is being able to say that we're not just about an FRC robot or an FTC robot or the students participating and registering for the program. It's about sustained growth of that child, and the shift that you'll see in those children who not only get to learn about the program and get all those wonderful life skills, but they come back to give, right? They come back to volunteer, they come back to mentor, they work in underserved communities, they teach, they do all of these things, that the culture that's built, and you'll see that in our competitions when you come to a live competitions, the community that we build is amazing to see, that the defined result of that child that you see who was in grade 9 and now probably sitting in maybe their own startup company, or giving back to their community as a doctor or as a scientist, or those are the things that FIRST does, is build character and build children. So it's not about it's not a STEM program where you're just coming to learn about building a robot. It's about building children.
The other thing that I wanted to add, and I had Googled this previously, Arti, you reminded me that I didn't really know what FIRST Robotics was either. And when I was trying to seek more information, this stat came up that I found really interesting. So in a Forbes article, the World Economic Forum indicated that by 2025, automation will supplant 85 million jobs. So 85 million jobs will be lost to automation. Sounds like a bad news story. In fact, quite the opposite. Automation, robotics will create 97 million jobs. So while 85 million will be lost, 97 million will be created. So how excited do you think corporations are going to be to engage with you young people, because you are already starting to engage with robotics? So they understand economically there's advantages to them supporting you. So using stats like that in your pitch, like feed it to them. They know it, but let them know that you know it.
Thank you so much. Maybe we'll do one final question, and it's going to be for Linda. Does it make sense to ask for multi-year sponsorships during COVID so that we can lock in their money? Or is it more fair to just ask for 1 year?
I am of the belief that many years is better than 1 year. That I think is the golden, the end of the rainbow, pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for fundraisers, is trying to lock partners into multi-year deals. You know, Sue had mentioned earlier, if you don't ask, you don't get. So if you are in a position to be able to provide similar continuity, similar benefits. So maybe you've got somebody that's going to be with the team for the next 2 or 3 years. I'm not sure how it's structured. I would always ask for a multi-year deal, but be prepared that they will come back. And you know, again, different organizations, depending on where they're getting the money, sometimes a fund, if it's part of a sort of a different pot of money, not sponsorship, but like funding, they might be able to say that, you know, some of them have criteria on in their portals to say, we do not support multi-year, or, you know, so sometimes it's part of their policy, but I would encourage you, whenever possible, if it is possible, to ask for more. And always ask for more. So you can negotiate.
All right, so I think that wraps up our question portion of the seminar. I wanted to thank you guys so much for joining us. You've been super helpful, and I'm sure we've learned so much. We're so thankful for everything that you've taught us. I also want to thank the audience for being active participants, sending in your questions. You really got us thinking. And I just want to remind you that our next seminar is Building Meaningful Partnerships with Corporate Sponsors on March 11th at 4 o'clock. So that's it. Everyone have a nice night.